when I was a little boy, I was curious about the beauty of nature's change. And so I used to look at the sky and see the fleeting movement of a cloud and changing weather patterns. And also love to get into the campfire and be fascinated by the shapes and the colors I could see.
Hey everyone, welcome to Season 3, Episode 28 of Sugidama Podcast, the podcast about Japanese sake, the drink which reinvents itself every now and then in order to attract new fans. And today, I'm going to talk to Naoki and Tracey from the Sparkling Sake Brewery, who not only make innovative sparkling sake, but make it here in the UK. But before you can listen to our conversation, let me tell you about our sponsor, London Sake, who have one of the widest selection of premium and craft sake available online today. You can choose from over 100 sake from 25 breweries, and they will deliver across the UK and many European markets. And if you don't know what sake to choose, you can use simple online tasting notes together with very sensible and affordable food pairings to help you decide. What's more, you can get a 10% discount by just using the code SUGIDAMA, all caps, during checkout. London Sake, making sake simple. My name is Alex, and I live in London. I am a certified sake specialist, sake judge, sake educator, and sake advocate. Besides this podcast, I have Sugidama blog, where I write about all things sake, publish tasting notes, overviews, and information about sake events happening in London. So today, as I already said, I'm going to talk to Naoki Toyota, a co-founder and the master brewer of the Sparkling Sake Brewery, which is based in the UK, in Cambridgeshire, and Tracey Delaney, the chief brand and marketing advisor to the brewery and the sake educator. I have known Naoki for a long time already. We went together to the Kielokaz course in 2018 and kept in touch all this time. With Tracey, we've been connected through Instagram for a while and finally met in person last year at the British Sake Association event. When I heard from Naoki 2 years ago that he decided to start a sparkling sake brewery in the UK, I've got very excited. Finally, they launched it in summer last year. So I was quite thrilled to talk to Tracey and Naoki to know more about the brewery. So let's listen to our conversation.
Please welcome our guest.
Hi Tracey, hi Naoki, how are you?
Great. Hi, Alex. Thanks for having us.
Hi.
Yeah, it's great to have you. It's very exciting because the UK is not very famous for its sake, and there are only 3 sake breweries. I think Kampai were the pioneers. They started the brewery some years ago, and then it was Dojima, and now you guys. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty good to have another sake brewery with excellent sake. And why don't we start with you talking about your background? So your background, how you become interested in sake, and about your first sake experience.
All right. So for me, I was born and raised in Japan. When I was a little boy, I was curious about the beauty of nature's change. And so I used to look at the sky and see the fleeting movement of a cloud and changing weather patterns. And also love to get into the campfire and be fascinated by the shapes and the colors I could see. The first forward to 2017, I had my first baby, and my wife enrolled in a business school in London. So I chose to take a paternity leave, which is unusual choice in the Japanese culture. Yeah,
Sure.
but looking back, that decision might have been really, but my curiosity. I mean, I wanted to see how I could mature by going beyond culture and the values that shaped my life until this point.
Mhm.
And and then after moving to the UK, I started cooking for my family. So honestly, I have never cooked before,
It's
but
exciting.
yeah, but it dawned on me. I was a fan of making food and drinks because it's very creative and it has a special power to provide smile and a surprise on people's face, regardless of countries, culture, and nationalities, and so on. And then one day I tried to make Japanese sake at home, like home brewing. So the sake I made was nigori sake or
Mhm.
cloudy sake, some people say. Um, yeah, it was fresh, lively. Yeah, it was very nice, and I was amazed and inspired to find out how the water rise and the microorganisms change and interact with each other to create the flavor and the texture at the end of the fermentation process.
Yeah.
That was actually um, the first experience I became interested in sake.
Have you tried sake before? Like, well, not making, but drinking.
Yeah, but honestly, I don't remember. Yeah, yeah. I used to drink a beer and a wine. Yeah, and sometimes Japanese sake, but I don't remember. Yeah,
Yeah. It's quite a normal story for Japanese people, especially like our generation and your
yeah,
generation, because I know that still people think about sake like old man drink rather than
Mm.
something that exciting and
yeah,
fashionable and cool. Hope that it will change. But
yeah. I hope so.
what about you, Tracy?
Yeah, so I don't like Naoki. I don't really come from a sake background. I was born and raised in New York, and then I went to Japan when I was 13 and was really impressed by the country and developed a deep love for it. I was too young at the time to drink sake or experience that side of the culture, but everything else really fascinated me, and I found it somewhat intoxicating from a intellectual and curiosity perspective. And so I said, that's it. I'm going to study Japanese, going to go live in Japan. I'm going to make that happen. And I did, and went to Japan when I was at university and then went back to work there. But it's somewhat unfortunate that my first experience with sake, or the one I can remember, is probably for all the wrong reasons, because it was a somewhat awful classic all you can drink nomi hodai type event as a student with cheap drinks and sake in the mix, and I felt terrible the next day and blamed it definitely on the sake, but it probably was the combination of all things in the mix. And I sort of spent the next 6 years that I was living in Japan trying to avoid sake. Now I look back and what a mistake and regrettable decision that was. If I can only turn back time, I think about all the sake I could have drank, but didn't. And then, fast forward to about the mid 2010s when, there started to become a big Japan tourism boom. People were going to Japan and asking me, what sake brewery should I visit? What should I drink? What type of sake should I drink when I go to Japan? And I felt terribly embarrassed as a Japan expert in business and in financial services.
Mm-hmm.
I could not answer this question. I would have to Google something, look at my phone, or just, try to avoid the question altogether. And I was terribly embarrassed. And in 2017, I was on maternity leave and decided that I was going to get over this embarrassment of not being able to answer these, sake questions. And also I had gone back and forth to Japan multiple times on pleasure and business. And I, had tasted dasai and thought, maybe sake isn't as terrible as I remember it being. So let me do something about it. And I took the international Kikisake that's led by Satomi Doseur, who was, I think, on your podcast some time ago, and co-taught by Ali from Tengu Sake. And, that really was much more than just an education to stop being embarrassed and be able to answer a basic question about sakes. In that time, I discovered not only an incredible, delicious, mind-blowing beverage in a range of tastes and temperatures, but the craftsmanship, passion, history, and modernity that I absolutely fell in love with as it related to sake. And, since then, I visited breweries, tried to drink as much sake as I could. I've just enrolled in John Gottner's sort of sake professional course, which I'll take in February, and I'm super excited about that. And of course, a highlight of my sake journey has been collaborating with Naoki on the Sparkling Sake Brewery. So yeah, that's my sake story, and testament to how much I love sake. I'm doing this in addition to being a mother of 3 kids and having like a fairly full-time job. But I find sake so inspiring, and I'm just so passionate about it. I couldn't imagine not having it being part of my life and my career.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it looks like 3 of us are alumni of Satomi and Oliver's Kikisake course, because we were with Naoki at the same course, and you did it later. So it's pretty cool. It's quite interesting that people are drawn to each other with the passion of sake and these things, and understand each other very quickly. And it's some kind of how to call it, red thread of destiny.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny because it's somebody that I had worked with in my day job that went to subsequently live in Japan, introduced me to Naoki, and again, another red thread of destiny that ran through our lives.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the brewery. So Naoki, how did you decide to start a sake brewery? Why in the UK, and why sparkling sake?
All right. So through my curiosity, along with the constant theme of impermanence, which is always in my mind, and also my first experience of brewing sake at home, I ended up making natural sparkling sake. And as to why I started this in the UK, so I just wanted to expand the accessibility of freshly natural sparkling sake for the UK market. And in addition to it, I realized the sense of beauty in the UK has similarity with Japan. So, there is abundance of beautiful nature in the UK, and there is a culture which loves change of a beautiful nature. For example, I often go to British Garden with my daughters, and I always feel a kind of familiarity with the British gardens, because each garden has a style of landscape gardens, which are to grow into their natural shapes and never look exactly the same. So, that coincidence drove me to follow my curiosity here in the UK. Yeah.
And why sparkling sake? Because, sparkling sake is... Let's talk first about what is sparkling sake, and then why you decided to do sparkling sake.
Right. So can you explain that, Tracey?
Yeah, sure. So sparkling sake, what it is, it starts with a still sake base. So that's really the baseline for sparkling sake. And in our case, that's a still base, which is pasteurized. So Naoki will make that. And I'll use Naoki as the example, but that generally applies to a number of types of sparkling sake. He'll make a still sake base, which will be pasteurized. And then one or two things can happen. So a brewery may decide that they'll use the still sake base and make it sparkling by the addition of CO2 bubbles. So that'll be a gas injection process. Or in our case, do a second fermentation in a bottle. It also may be a second fermentation that may happen in a big batch. In our case, it's a second fermentation in a bottle, which means that some active yeast will be added into the bottle. This can be in the form of part of the batch that is currently in the brewing process, so taken from the moromi and then put in. For example, the bottle will then be closed and the second fermentation will take place with all of the microorganisms, the rice and the water, working in natural harmony with one another to produce an effervescent and bubbly brew. And once that is complete over a number of days, the product will then be sparkling sake and ready for distribution to consumers. Another difference with sparkling sake is that the ABV alcohol percentage tends to be lower than still sake. So while you'll have a still sake at 15 to 16%, most sparkling sakes will hover around 5 to 12%, and there's a bit of a range there. So you look at your Mio, which I think is around 5 to 6%, if I'm correct off the top of my head, and then our product, which will be in the 11-12% range. So that's what sparkling sake is. The amount of bubbles you will get will vary. CO2 injection will be a much more powerful bubble. Some of the naturally sparkling sakes will be on a scale of like effervescent to bubbly. And then if you look, to Japan, the AWA Sake Association has some, set rules about what constitutes the type of sparkling sake that can be called AWA Sake in Japan. And so, I think sparkling sake is relatively nascent, if you will, right? So I think the first proper marketing of sparkling sake was around 1998. So it's been around for some time, doesn't have a super long history. And the industry around sparkling sake is continuing to take form with standards, explanations, processes, and innovation within the space as well.
Okay. Yes. So yeah, it is pretty clear. So there are two ways. One is more like making Coca-Cola when you just inject the CO2, and another one is more like champagne when you do it in the bottle.
Exactly. And you can find both within the UK market as well as obviously within Japan.
Yeah. I wrote an article, I think last year in December, about the sparkling sake and featuring some of the sake which are available in the market, including our.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I will put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, very timely for, when it came out for the holidays, but certainly, for spring is always a nice time to have a nice glass of bubbly in the sunshine. So.
Yeah, but I was thinking that sparkling sake sounds more difficult to make than normal sake. So why do you start with sparkling sake? Why do you decide to do this?
Yeah,
it's quite challenging thing.
It is challenging, and it produces, it's two types of challenges, right? Because first, Naoki needs to get a really good quality base sake. So just think like a really good quality jinmaishu, that's the base. And then it needs to go through another process, which is a fair point, because why not make life easier for yourself and just make a good old jinmaishu and call it a day. but I think and certainly as Naoki looked at the market and thought about what he wanted to bring to UK consumers, it really was like this USP around how do you give consumers in the UK the freshest, naturally sparkling sake available. Because if you think about it, even the sparkling sake that you're going to get from Japan still needs to go through an export process, a plane, an expensive, refrigerated crate on a plane, UK immigration, and then a distribution channel. So Naoki's idea was, how can we provide the UK consumer with the freshest, naturally sparkling sake, meaning the second fermentation has happened, it's not pasteurized, it's literally shipped direct to consumers. So within 24 to 48 hours, you can have the freshest, naturally sparkling sake on your doorstep and table and in your glass. So that's really what motivated, Naoki about that. And then there's the USP of being the only brewery that's dedicated exclusively to the production of sparkling sake, both in the UK, but in the world. So, it was a single-minded focus to provide the freshest, naturally sparkling sake to UK consumers. And Naoki felt very passionate about that.
Sounds very fascinating, because obviously sparkling sake, it's not that common even in Japan, but especially in the UK, because it's not that many sake available. It's usually one or two brands, and that's it. I think what happens if you thinking about sake, you probably want to buy normal sake, and if you're thinking about sparkling, you probably think about prosecco or kawa or champagne. So, but I think it's a good combination of two. When you've got sparkling, you've got sake, which is pretty good proposition for a lot of people.
Yeah, actually, of course, I love still sake as well. Like, Junmai, Ginjo, Junmai, Ginjo, Futsushu, the Koshu, and so on. But I was thinking what I can devote all resources or passion to something. And then, we decided to pursue our concept, which is the beauty of nature's impermanence. That's why we focus on producing natural sparkling sake.
Okay, yeah. So you don't come from the sake brewing background, right? So
I was internet industry.
In internet. Okay. So how did you learn about brewing sake? Because it's not that I always was thinking when I write about sake, I always say, if you compare sake with wine is 90% ingredients, 20% brewer's skills, because it's relatively simple to do. Obviously, it's an amazing skill to make amazing wine, but still it's pretty straightforward. With sake, it's 80% of brewer's skill and only 20% probably ingredients. So it's much more difficult to make. So how did you learn in pretty short period of time how to make sake?
Yeah, so after I decided to get into the sake industry, I moved back to Japan to learn how to brew natural sparkling sake. I was super lucky. I met Mr. Kurose, who is one of the legendary sake brewers in Japan. He produces a variety of handcrafted sake in Nara, which is, the birthplace of Japanese sake. He's open-minded to share his method, knowledge, skills with the people who are passionate about brewing sake like me. The first time I met him, I said, honestly, I don't want to make just alcoholic beverages. I do want to express the beauty of nature's impermanence through natural sparkling sake. And he said, that's good. So you can do it. Let's try it. Yeah, so he taught me everything he knows. Actually, even now, I chat with him almost every day
Oh,
about
really?
about sake. Yeah, so in order to work in harmony with nature in sake for our product. Yeah, so I was very lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a tremendous luck, because to find somebody who really taught you to make this quite difficult drink and who is passionate about it as you are, it's really great thing. It's what you can ask for.
And I think what's really nice about Kurose-san is that he also is working in limited batch quantity, kind of almost craft sake. And so it's very much in the ethos of what the Sparkling Sake Brewery is producing. And he's doing it, Naoki, correct me if I'm wrong, mostly himself. So it's really similar to the experience that Naoki himself has in his day-to-day reality.
Was there any part of the process that you found difficult to master at the beginning? Or some concept that you found difficult to understand, or I don't know, something that you learning how to do that, you found it, you had to do probably a bit more to master it or understand it?
I think the most challenging thing was to work in harmony with the nature in the UK.
Right.
I mean, actually, our debut product called AWA is inspired by one of his natural sparkling sakes. I had to adjust recipe or brewing approach to fit British nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was most challenging thing for me.
Okay.
I think, like in the product development process, which I was very lucky to be a part of and on the receiving end of, Naoki brewed a lot of bottles. There were a lot of prototypes, before getting to the product that we felt is like, yes, this is it. Thinking about koji rice ratios, thinking about, how the water in the UK works with the recipe and the brewing methods, and, what's the right taste, flavor, that we want to deliver and delight consumers, with. So I definitely saw firsthand some of that, as Naoki worked through some of the challenges and the differences between Japan and the UK in terms of the natural environment, and how do we stay, how do we work with that in harmony and respect to produce a product for the market that's going to be fantastic.
In terms of the process, I think it's so fascinating to create something that makes people happy and something that really connected with nature, with culture. It's what I like about sake. It's not just a drink. It's something much more than that. When you add nature to it, and it's not Japanese nature, but the UK nature, which is obviously different. It's definitely rains more often in the UK. And I can imagine how you going through all these small things and trying to make the product as good as you can. But what was the most difficult part of setting up a sake brewery here? Because one thing when you thinking about, okay, I want to start brewing sake, you can start brewing at home and develop the product. But the brewery, even small brewery, it's probably quite difficult, because you have to find you have to find place, you have to find water source, you have to find all other things. So what was the most challenging part of setting up the business?
I think, part of what was there were so many variables. When Naoki went to set up the business, actually, and look for a location, it was like right at the debut of the COVID pandemic. So like, I think, Naoki, you signed the lease in April 2020, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So just, as COVID was hitting, Naoki was like, I'm going to set up the brewery. And, if you think back to that time, like there were restrictions on what you could visit and moving around. Thankfully, Naoki, found a place in Cambridge, a brewery around 400 square feet, but needed to sort of renovate it himself. And so he spent the first couple of months, just getting the brewery itself set up, and then, sourcing the equipment. I think also casting our minds back to that time, there were some, challenges with getting the rice into the country because there were all of those like shipping logistics issues, which, still continue to plague the world today. But, there was that moment in time where there was the initial shock from the pandemic. So, I mean, what was the hardest part? I think it was like there was kind of barrier against built on barrier. But, Naoki never gave up and just kept, working through. And, during the time he was also separated from his family who was in Japan, and, travel back and forth obviously wasn't easy. So, he was doing it large part himself out in Cambridge, setting up the brewery and all the infrastructure, as well as all of the process and paperwork that's required by the UK government to kind of get the appropriate licenses, the environmental checks, so on and so forth. So there was a lot of groundwork that needed to be laid before even starting to brew. And so that's, how Naoki spent the first few months of the Sparkling Sake Brewery's life, just kind of getting all of that infrastructure set up.
Yeah, I think obviously COVID played quite dramatic role in all process, because obviously he delayed a lot of things, because I think April was one of these quite strict lockdowns.
Yes.
And people were told not even go outside, or like spend 1 hour outside only if you're training or something. And I can imagine that it was difficult that time.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Yeah. And, I think one silver lining, though, of that time and experience was when we initially started having some industry interviews about the idea and trying to get some feedback on it. A lot of everything pre-COVID was focused on restaurant distribution, right? Yeah. And not so much on B2C, and then COVID shifted that on its head, where sake sales really went gangbusters, direct to consumer. And I think in some way helped open up sake onto people's tables to experiment at home. And ultimately, looking back on the time now, probably was a benefit to our business in terms of the fact that we have a, direct to consumer B2C, model, and people are comfortable with buying sake online without tasting it. Because if you think back to pre-pandemic, the amount of tastings there would be, and there were online sake sales, but not at the magnitude, that we see today.
Yeah. I think it's a quite big shift from restaurants and bars to online and physical shopping, when people are buying sake and drinking it either at home or at some kind of parties or something, this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Probably the interest for sake picked up in this way when people are trying to experiment at home. And Okay, before we talk about the sake Naoki makes, let me remind you about London Sake, our sponsor, and their huge selection of curated sake sets, which provide a great opportunity to explore various styles and types of sake. Have a look, but don't forget about the magic word Sugidama, all caps, to get your 10% discount. So let's move to the actual sake, because the main feature of your brewery is the product, our sake. So You talk about some philosophy behind AWA Sake, like its connection with nature and things like that. But probably you could talk a bit more about the other key points of sake, how it's different from other sparkling sake in the market. What is the main idea behind it? Things like that.
Yeah, sure. The philosophy behind AWA really comes from what Naoki spoke about before, back to when he was a little boy, the curiosity and respect for nature's changes, which is also a key element in Japanese aesthetics. And coincidentally, I studied Japanese aesthetics and philosophy as my university degree. So it's also a passion area for me. And, I think that comes through in terms of much of what you see in terms of our product, our design, approach, and philosophy. I think for both Naoki and I, it comes from a very profound place that, we were moved by from a very young age. And in making sake in general, there is a natural coexistence between the rice, the microorganisms, the water, who all need to work in respect and harmony with one another. And with AWA, there's like no intervention. It's a no intervention product, meaning we don't try to artificially control the nature that's around us. Naoki doesn't temperature control the brewery, lets nature take over, if you will. So each batch may have a slight variation in flavor and just in its being, based on the way that the nature has interacted with the microorganisms, the rice, and the water. There's a saying in Japanese, like ichigo ichie, meaning a sort of moment in time encounter, which will never be repeated. And that's sort of what AWA represents in a bottle, between the rice, the water, and the microorganisms, which produce this sort of bubbly work of art of a specific moment in time. And so that's really the driving philosophy behind both the brewery, but really the essence of the product itself. Yeah, in terms of the product and sort of how it, either compares to the market or what are some of the characteristics that make it special from a sort of technical perspective. So, some of the basics. One, bottle size. We have 375 ml bottle. So we produce in half-size bottles currently. It's intended to be drunk when you open it at its freshest. It doesn't preserve well if you want to have its truly bubbly nature if you leave it in the fridge open for like a couple of days. ABV around 12%. It's a junmai, meaning, it's water, rice, koji, and yeast, nothing else. We use table rice. Some people are surprised to hear that because there's a perception that you absolutely must need sake rice to produce premium, high-grade sakes. But Naoki uses a rice from Nara Prefecture, the birthplace of sake, called Hino Hikari, and is able to work with that rice and produce an amazingly elegant product.
So import the rice from Japan?
Yes.
So do you import it already polished?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's imported, polished, and the polishing ratio is 70%. Naoki also uses 50% koji rice, which is a bit unique, right? Because I think most sakes are probably around 20% koji rice at 20%. Yeah. And so that's really quite a labor-intensive, process to produce that quantity of koji rice. We often get asked why make it with like such a high percentage of koji rice? Part of it is the taste, the flavor, and the type of product we wanted to deliver. Naoki tried with almost like 100% koji rice. We tried all gradations of koji rice to try to get the right balance. And even though it is extremely labor intensive and time consuming, to use 50% koji rice, it produces the product that we believe is the best representation of, what we want to provide to consumers and, the taste profile that Naoki specifically had in mind. In terms of koji, we're using yellow koji. As I mentioned before, you've got the natural carbonation, in a bottle and the base sake is pasteurized, but the second fermentation is not pasteurized. Hence why we also recommend making sure you store your awa in the refrigerator to keep it at its freshest.
Yeah, it's I really like this sake because I tried it back in November, December, and I found I like that it's got like these grapefruity notes with yogurt and some kind of rice, and in terms of aroma, and it was very fresh, quite acidic, I would say, quite dry in my opinion, but it was lightly effervescent, not like, as you said, with probably injection of CO2. And it's got like a citrusy notes, a bit of honey, and the finish was pretty quick. And it was quite nice kick. It was like some bitterness at the end, which gives you a very nice kick, which I quite liked. It was light. It was very, very, very enjoyable. And the good thing is that with some sparkling sake, it's more like you think about it. Oh yeah, it's probably a celebration drink because you probably want to open it for some kind of birthday or New Year party or something. But this one is definitely something that you can casually enjoy. You can, especially in summer, I guess. I think in summer it's amazing, fresh and cold, and in hot summer. Yeah, I think it's quite unique in terms of sparkling sake. And it's like usenigori or something like that, right? It's slightly cloudy.
Yeah, because you still have a bit of the residual yeast or within the bottle, and it's funny. It is very easy to drink, and the UK is a very thirsty market. So I think there is some demand to have a larger bottle size because people seem to get through it, fairly quickly. Yeah. Which is great, and we're so pleased that people are enjoying AWA so much and so responsibly as well. Something that Naoki is working on is, getting the right balance of effervescence, right? So you mentioned it's lightly effervescent. He wanted to try to up the bubbles a little bit. This is because it's a natural process. It's hard to control it in the way that you could with the CO2 injection. And for those of you who've tried the latest batch that was just released in January, the first batch of the year, he's worked to get it a bit more bubbly. So if you try the batches going forward, I think you'll sense a change, and you may even sense an oh so delicate shift in the flavor profile as we've gone into the colder months. And Naoki tracks that. He has a nice sort of table with a line that shows, the atmospheric and environmental changes, and then how that influences the bitterness or the umami and the different elements of the product.
Yeah, it's amazing. Do you have any food pairing recommendations for your sake?
Yeah. So one thing we really like, and it's one of the hidden gems of the sake world, is pairing it with avocado, a little bit of a twist of lime or lemon, like a little bit of an avocado salad, and some tacos that are not so spicy. It makes a nice balance. I personally am a big fan of sake in general paired with Mexican food. I feel like why, and Indian food, like why is the world not all over this? Is always a big question on my mind. But that's a very nice combination, together with a bit of goat's cheese in the oven with a dollop of honey on a little cracker makes for a nice pairing. Some lightly grilled or lightly fried whitefish is another pairing that we quite like as well. And frankly, it's just great on its own. I've had, many people, and, part of the drinking culture in the UK is also people tend to drink without food, for a fair part of the drinking session. And a number of people have said just how enjoyable it's been just having a glass of AWA, on its own as an aperitif, or just as a nice drink in the evening. So there's a lot of food possibilities with AWA. but just as much, it's a lovely drink on its own.
Yeah, it's quite versatile. Yeah.
Naoki, if you have made any other discoveries pairing awa with food. Oh, Brussels sprouts. Yes, the Christmas.
Really?
Yes, Brussels sprouts, roasted Brussels sprouts with pomegranate and was it almonds? I think it was.
Yes.
Naoki is often, because of his newfound love of cooking during his parental leave, experimenting in the kitchen with different dishes and awa to find some unlikely pairings.
Yeah. So, as I understand, you only sell awa on your website. You don't sell it through any other outlets, right?
We just, in December, we launched a partnership with Pantechnicon,
Okay.
Sakaya, their sake shop. And so there will be our retail distribution partner for this brewing season. So you can go down to Pantechnicon and pick up a bottle or order through our website. We'll also be launching a pre-order. So to date, we've just had limited batch availability, and we'll continue that model. That's core to our business model. Each batch is handcrafted in coordination with nature and making sure that we're bringing to consumers the freshest, naturally sparkling sake. So it makes sense to do that in limited batches that we produce on a rolling basis that is released about every 3 weeks. The way we were selling it to date was Naoki would release a batch. People could go on the website and buy it if they were signed up to our limited batch news or got the notification on Instagram. However, some people want to make sure that they can get a bottle because we had some success in selling out rather quickly, and we'll be launching a pre-order closer to the date of each batch coming out. I think it's about 5 days in advance. We'll open up for pre-order, and then people can put in their order for awa to make sure that they do indeed get a bottle. Otherwise, it'll be available on the day when the limited edition batch comes out through to the period that we're then sold out of that specific batch.
Okay. Yeah. So pretty clear. Because I noticed that every time because obviously I was writing the article and doing other stuff, and I'll sometimes go to your website to check things. And every time I went there, log into your website, it always was out of stock or something like not available. So yeah, I can see that people really love it, and you've got pretty good sales. But what are your plans for the future? Are you going to increase production? Are you going to add some new product? Or are you going to focus on producing limited batches every 3 months and stick to it? What are your vision of your business in like next 3-5 years?
Yeah, I think, this is our first official brewing season. So, it's a really important year for us and especially for Naoki, to understand how nature, the environment, the seasons work in coordination with the product, but also for us to better understand consumer habits in relation to and buying patterns in relation to our product, right? So thinking about like, are we launching the limited edition batches at the right moment? Like, do we need to up quantity sometimes and decrease a little bit other times, et cetera? So there's some, like, I would say basic business hygiene that we'll take away from this first brewing year and then apply as we go forward. And so that will help guide us on, how much do we up production? Production will also be dictated by our ability to probably move from the space that we're currently in to a larger premises that would then allow for, production at a larger scale, but still maintaining that handcrafted approach with the focus on craftsmanship and continuing to do limited edition batches. And I think we'll focus on getting that product right, for the next couple of years and making sure that that's working well. In tandem, we want to start working with some restaurants, for example. And so we've got a partnership that we announced at the British Sake Association dinner in December that we'll be doing with the Porthminster Cafe in St. Ives, Cornwall, which is an amazing location. If anybody hasn't been there, I recommend, getting down to the restaurant, or at least checking out their Instagram site. Beautiful location, but more importantly, a team behind it who are really inspired by nature, seasons, the seasonality of like the amazing produce, fish, herbs, greenery of Cornwall. And it felt like they happened to come to know our product, taste it, and started talking to us about, is there an opportunity to incorporate it into their menu and some of what they're doing. So we're still in early days talking about that partnership, but hopefully launch something in the next couple of months. And so that would be a great opportunity, for us. And part of our longer term vision is like, how do we start to incorporate our product, not necessarily into Japanese restaurants, but making it part of a local culinary drinking experience here in the UK with brands that share our same values and philosophy around nature, seasonality, locality, provenance, et cetera. And so that's another objective for us over the next, couple of years. And of course, it goes without saying, helping to educate about sake in general as a category, because if we do well, sake as a category does well. If people know more about sake, they know more about us. If people start, and it's never a case of drink awa, it's usually awa and, and so how does this fit into the course of a meal, be it wine, be it sake? But we really believe that if we do our part in educating, not just about our product, but sake in general, and the sake category in the UK continues to grow and flourish, all boats rise. And we're all in this for the love of sake and for helping to promote it, through the country and beyond.
I quite like the idea that you want to marry like nature, local food, sake, and things like that, which is pretty noble and quite good. Yeah.
I mean, we're hoping that people don't. What we want to really focus on is that people see the possibilities of our product and of sake with food that's not just Japanese food. Because it would be obvious to just try to list our product on a menu at a Japanese restaurant. And that's long-term would be a great objective, as well, and something we would love to do. But I think it's great also to have sake in the mix of a lot of local cuisine and where people would not expect to find it, and help to provide that sense of joy and delight and discovery, both through a bottle of awa and sake in general.
Yeah. It's great to walk into a restaurant and see awa on the menu list without thinking, oh yeah, it's not a Japanese restaurant. But yeah, I think it's the main thing about promoting sake is just to make sure that people don't associate it with only Japanese food, but with any food, which obviously is true. Any ideas for new products, or you haven't thought about it, or you want to focus on make this one perfect?
I think for now, it's one of those things. Both of us are so passionate about sake and like the possibilities that it's easy to let your mind run away with all of the things that we could be doing. I think for the next couple of years, the focus really is on, make the best possible naturally sparkling sake. And our brewery does have a single-minded focus of doing what it says on the tin, which is the Sparkling Sake Brewery.
Yeah.
I think there are, of course, possibilities as you think of, both the byproducts of sake, so sake lees and other, possible product line developments. But for now, I think we're going to try to focus on execute this flawlessly and make the best possible product. And then I think great things will follow. I don't know, Naoki, if you want to add anything onto that.
Yeah. So as Tracey said, for the couple of years, I want to expand. I want to try a variety of natural sparkling sake to express beautiful nature in the UK. Of course, at the moment, we're going to focus on the producing our just one product. But at the same time, I've been experimenting to produce new product.
Yeah, I think as soon as you get into that, you can't help not experimenting. You know, it's a nature of these kind of things because it was great to talk to you guys, and it's really fascinating because it's a great product. It's something that we don't have much here in the UK in terms of like sake brewery, which is producing amazing sake, and I love the philosophy behind it. I love this nature sake and combination which produces this sake, and the product itself is great. Really, I can recommend it to anyone. And it was a very interesting story about how you managed to do this kind of project in very difficult time, because I remember I was talking to Erica from Moto London, and they opened the bar just before the COVID.
That's right.
And
That's right.
they went through 2 or 3 lockdowns, and it's quite amazing story, and yours as well, because to start making sake when everything is closed and everything is restricted, it was really challenging, and you pull it out. So it's amazing. So thanks a lot for coming to the podcast, and I wish you best of luck. And I'm looking forward to try more, because it's another thing I like about AWA is that, as you said, it's different every batch. So it's always interesting to try it. So I'm looking forward to try it again. And I see you around, and I hope that your sales will grow and grow. And when you move to another location and expand your production, I think it will definitely be great. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sure, once we get to a bigger premises, we'd love to have our customers around. And thank you for having us on the podcast, and thanks for all you do to help promote sake in the UK and worldwide with like your listener base. It's great, and I learn something every time I listen to you. So keep up the good work, and we will see you around London.
Yeah, definitely. So I will put in the show notes all the information about the brewery, about your Instagram account. So just to make sure that everybody knows where to find you and where to order sake. So thanks a lot.
That's great.
See ya.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank
Bye,
you.
Naoki.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
That's it for today. I hope that you have enjoyed my conversation with Tracey and Naoki, and are excited about their sake and eager to try it. As Tracey said, you can either head to their website, the link is in the show notes, and order it straight away, if available, or wait a bit and order then. Sorakami, another online sake store, has also started to stock AWA, so I will put a link in the show notes as well. Or you can go to Pantechnicon and see if it's available there. It's worth some effort to get and try our sake. But I'll be back with more episodes about the history of sake brewing and more great interviews. In the meantime, if you cannot buy a bottle of our sake, read my post with recommendations for sparkling sake, including AWA by the way, on sugidama.co.uk. Or you can look up Sparkling Sake at the London Sake website, where you can get a 10% discount by entering Sugidama, all in caps, at the checkout. let me know what you think about new AWA Sake. If you have any questions or suggestions about any sake topic, just drop me a line. My email address is alex@sugidama.co.uk, or you can tag me on Instagram or Twitter @sugidamablog in one word. Again, if you like the episode and want more, hit the subscribe button and you will get every new episode downloaded into your player as soon as it's out. If you would like to give me a bit of support, please leave a review or rate Sugidama podcast. There are two places you can easily leave a review. On Apple Podcasts, if you use iPhone, iPad or Mac, go to the Sugidama podcast page there, scroll down to the bottom where you can see reviews. There will be a link to add your own review. Another option is the Podchaser website, where you can leave a review of any podcast regardless of what platform you use to listen to it. I've got a link to my page there in the show notes. You need to register at Podchaser, but it's easy because you can use your Twitter or Facebook credentials and then leave a review. Spotify now allows to rate the podcasts you listen to. So if you use this platform, rate Sugidama podcast there. Of course, you can share this podcast with your friends on your social media, chat apps, anywhere. A lot of people mention a friend's recommendation as a reason for listening to a particular podcast. So you can be that friend and support Sugidama podcast. Thanks a lot for listening. Kampai!
Suge, 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 Sugidama blog. Suge, 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 Sugidama blog.